Well, good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to our Family Life Enrichment series. It is exciting to welcome you to our penultimate session in this series. We've done some interesting things so far in this series, and I'm glad that you were able to participate with us. We looked at habits that help and hinder us from helping or hindering us in relation to having our best life, which indeed is the theme for our series, Living Your Best Life. We looked at marriage vows. We looked at being uniquely single. We had our Dr. Renia Boyce talking to us about managing the mind of COVID. Last week, we looked at days of our lives, the men's edition and the women's edition, and I was made to understand that lots of fun was had in the ladies' room. I just want to assure you that we had lots of fun in the men's room as well. And this evening, we're looking at the topic Aged to Perfection as we take a look at gerontology. This is going to be a wonderful session. And so I want to welcome you to our Family Life Enrichment series. We do this every year, every Wednesday between Mother's Day and Father's Day. We get together and we look at different aspects of family life. This series is brought to you compliments of the Churches of God in Britain in St. Philip, Bournes Village in St. George, the Garden Community Church in St. James, and Silver Sands Church of God in Christchurch. We are delighted to be able to partner together to bring you this Family Life Enrichment series. This evening, we have a very special guest who is with us. So I want to introduce you to a wonderful young lady who is going to be taking us through this great session together. I'm sure that you are going to have a wonderful time. You're going to learn a lot. So please meet Trudy Rowe Weeks. Trudy, great to have you on this evening.
Hi, yes, thank you. I thank you for having me. Really,
Yes.
I did this session about 2 years ago, believe it or not, in 2019, and I probably preferred it then because we were in person,
right?
And now we're over computers,
right?
But it is a delight to be here again,
Awesome.
to share about aging, and while I'm sharing with you, you probably will share more with me. So I look forward to that.
That's okay. That's fine. But Trudy, we're grateful that you took the time to come and be with us. Trudy considers herself just a simple soul with an interest in many subject matters. She is professionally trained in New York in the fields of gerontology, palliative care and end-of-life care, and clinical social work. Trudy remains of the view that there is still so much left to be learned about the world and humanity. Not one too keen on titles, credentials, and formalities. She prefers to be known as wife, daughter, mother, sister, aunt, friend, and tonight presenter. She is excited to share with us, to learn from you, and hopefully, as we all engage in the multitude of our experiences tonight, we all walk away with fresh perspectives. So Trudy, it is wonderful to have you share with us this evening. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself, and we are going to get running. How we are doing this session is going Zoom to YouTube. And so those persons who are with us on YouTube, we're going to ask you if you have questions, or comments. Trudy would like to hear from you. And so we are going to relay those questions here. So you can type your questions in the chat. We will pull them in, and we will be sure to share those questions or those comments with Trudy. Aging is something that affects all of us as long as we're alive. From the moment we are born, we start to age, and we continue aging until we die. In the Church of God Reformation movement, Trudy, over the last few years, we've had so many centenarians, so many. It's amazing. And because we are a church that has been here for 110 years, naturally, we would have multi-generational membership, which will span little children all the way up to senior adults. Okay, and so this kind of session is especially essential for churches like ours. And then in every family, the dynamics of family life suggest that, you know, as long as we are here, we're going to have persons around us, persons in our lives who are of a particular age. And so we need to be able to give them the best care and understand them well and all those things. And I am sure that you're going to help us to do some of that tonight. So again, welcome. And I look forward to a wonderful session together.
Thank you again. Thank you. And it's lovely to hear you have so many centenarians. The church in itself is a centenarian. You know, I think that just living past a certain stage, the Bible says 70, and sometimes that's not guaranteed. And I think that we have seen that a lot over the past 18 months or so. Personally wise, I actually just lost my great aunt in Trinidad. She was 106. And today, and I mean, she lived, she really truly lived. So she just literally just passed on from here into eternity. I just meant like she was dancing with the angels that afternoon in May. And then only today, my mom, her friend's mom got buried, and she was 101. So we do have something very special and spectacular happening in the Caribbean. I don't think we recognize it as much of the true value in having centenarians. I feel as though people would want, I remember, what's his name, Mr. Cisnet. I don't know if you remember him, but he was the longest living gentleman in Barbados. And you had scientists fly in to kind of like read the genetic codes and that sort of stuff to see what is being done differently that you have this long life. They say that the longest livers are in Japan. I think they need to revisit that and come to Barbados, come to Trinidad, come over to the Caribbean and definitely see what we have as a treasure here.
And flying fish, you know?
Yeah, and the yams and the sweet potatoes, those natural things. And then guess what? It'll be exploited. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to talk about age to perfection. So again, thank you guys for having me. It's probably gonna be a little different. I didn't go the end of care and all of that, but I'm sure we're going to touch on it just because it is part of gerontology, is part of living. And then I asked Brother Bellamy when he approached me, I said, what are we talking about? He said, can you do this? I said, no problem. What are we talking about? He said, living your best life. And I'm like, okay, what's that? I didn't tell him that. I'm just like, what's your best life? I feel as though I'm living some type of life. I'm not sure if it's my best life, especially with the past 2 years, how that has gone. But then I saw the flyer and it said age to perfection. And then I go like, what is perfection? I can be very cynical. I have to admit that. What is perfection? And I think that I want to kind of contextualize it. And I prefer to say optimal aging. So yes, the title is age to perfection, but optimal aging. And optimal is quite relative. And when I say relative, what do I mean? I mean, it differs from person to person. So what might be good for Trudy might not be good for Reverend Boyce. What might be good for Reverend Boyce might not be good for his wife. It might not be considered the good life. So it has to be relative to what you as a person want, what you want to create, what you want to curate in your life. So that's just something I want you to keep in mind, because I find sometimes we get into comparisons of how each other is living or each other's family is living. And it's not necessarily the way we should pattern our life, but we can have something great too from our lives. So we'll go about discussing how we get to that stage. Again, age to perfection. I thought, and living best life. So I thought, okay, in this day and age, as a young person, still consider myself quite young, the best life is that one on like IG or Facebook, on the social media platforms. And I can hardly find a photo of myself, but everyone has a photo, and it seems as though they're out there having fun, traveling the world, eating dinner, doing different things, showing it off. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I clearly am not living my best life. And many other people might feel that way too. But there's so much more to life than just that. And there's so much more to life than just the showmanship of it all. So let's start. Next slide, Lennox. In this age to perfection. And if you could, yes, what is perfection? And I love quotations. And what is aging? We know it's the process of growing old. We know that from the time we are conceived in the womb, you go from weeks or days to they measure then the baby in, I am 3 months along in the third trimester, the second trimester. You're aging, the sperm and the egg are getting older and they're forming into a body. They are then becoming a baby. The baby is delivered. And from then, the baby becomes 1 month old, 2 months old, 18 months. They have to get their shots at this specific, there's specific markers that mark age. So aging is just the idea of growing older, as we all know. And that's what makes it very practical. So aging is just another word for living. That's what Cindy Joseph says. And then somebody says, you can't help getting older, but you don't have to get old. That's George Burns. And I love his quote, you can't help getting older. It's something that is just natural, that once it lives, it dies. This idea of atrophy, this idea of if it ascends, it must descend. You know, that's just the natural laws that we follow in life. But just to tap back, aging is living, right? Aging is growth. Aging is experience. Aging is change, because we're not always in a constant form. If the baby remains the baby, then life has not been lived. They have not experienced, they have not gone through the bodily changes that they need to do. Maturity has not happened. So something is wrong. There's stagnation. And so, you know, I want us to start seeing aging in that sort of light. That is something that we continuously do. So it's not a matter of I'm waiting until, let's say, I'm 65 plus to be considered old. I consider myself as aging. I'm 34. I consider myself as aging. I have a little baby. He's 19 months. I consider him as aging. When he was born, I considered him as aging. So, you know, it's something very, very continuous, as opposed to a snapshot or just one portion or one moment in time. And once you see that, once you see aging like that, what I say all the time is you become an expert. And so tonight, it's not necessarily that I'm going to be telling you anything new or anything you don't know, because you have been doing this all your life up to this point, whatever age you are more expert than I am on the topic, because guess what? You know you better than I know you, and you have known what has worked. What I'm going to be sharing are just things to support maybe what you've been doing, something to maybe lend an idea, and give you some more perspective, right? So I want to disclaim a few things. I don't have graphs. I don't have definitions, just because guess what? You have been doing this all along. So I expect to ask some questions and get some responses coming in through YouTube. And then we go from there. So I want it to be as interactive as possible across this platform. And we'll see how much we come up with, yeah? So next slide, please. So I wanted to bring some context to this presentation. And as I thought about living your best life, I said, I have to look at it, or I can't look at gerontology the same way, through the same lens that I once looked at it before. It was very, very one way, one directional, very linear. And I have recognized that gerontology, the process of aging, the process of living on a whole, has been changed by that one thing called COVID-19. So at this point, I just want you to put in the chat box, what are some things that happened during COVID that stuck out for you? It could be 5 answers, 3 answers, doesn't matter. We're going to have a whole list, and that list is exhaustive. So if you can just engage and just put in what happened and stood out for you in COVID, or maybe just how you were impacted, I would sure love to hear it. Just so we can get this discussion tool going, and we can share some context. So I'll just hang on because I know there's a little lag. I'll hang on until you do that.
All right, so Trudy, we're on a 20-second delay with YouTube, so it means that they're not going to get it immediately. So just give them a few seconds to get it, and then we'll get moving.
That's fine. Sorry, I'm here saying that's fine, but I have my phone on mute. Yeah, that's fine.
But I know that for sure one of the things that happened during COVID, and as it relates to church, is that we would have heard that the persons who are most susceptible to COVID-19 are persons who are elderly. And as a result, more elderly persons stayed away from in-person services. And then also even the necessary things like going to the supermarket. So there was a lot of isolation where persons were not interacting as they would physically with other persons. So I know that is one of the things that stood out, where it seemed as though COVID stripped us of a lot of our physical social interaction.
Yeah, certainly did. And we have here in the chat, for me, it was the realization that things that previously seemed important were not so important. Me too. Me too. Limited physical interaction with family and friends. Yeah. Same thing that, Pastor was talking about. And yeah, it definitely targeted the elderly. I felt that even at first, even with vaccinations and so forth, you wanted to vaccinate the elderly first because they're the most vulnerable and, like you said, more susceptible to disease just because of physical makeup, decline in immunity, that sort of stuff. So from a clinical perspective, I'm no doctor. I think it would have been on the safer side to target them first. But also I wonder about how they felt about it being targeted. Interesting. Anybody else before I move on? Because we can just bring it up. There's a lot that happened in COVID-19. So just in the interest of time, I'm just going to have you move on, Lennox, to the next slide, and it's going to bring it up, some things that we went through. Yeah, so you can, there we go. So some things that happened. I have at the top of my list, it felt like time stood still, massive job loss, tons of deaths locally and globally. We still hear another COVID patient has died. Well, another person who had COVID-19, they were either vaccinated or unvaccinated. We still hear that report. Tons of births, COVID babies. Mine was one. Massive lockdowns. Economic fallout of nations. Churches closed initially and then eventually opened using Zoom, as we are here. Rise in technology, Zoom and Teams meetings, homeschool, socialization limited, travel limited. And as I said, this list is exhaustive. We can keep going. It means something different. Everybody had a different reaction and interaction with this thing called COVID-19. So next slide. One thing that stood out for me is the uncertainty of life. And I think that as we age, we have to keep that in mind. And my words here, something truly traumatic and disruptive happened that we simply cannot ignore. And that jolted humanity into a different level of awareness. At least I hope that it jolted us into a different level of awareness. I think sometimes when traumatic events happen, some people become really aware and very cognizant of what is occurring around them and want to do something to change that going forward post-trauma. And then others are quite fine with going on like nothing happened. And they're not aware. It didn't do anything to their psyche. It didn't change anything. It's just business as usual. But I think that COVID-19 was a turning point for all aspects of humanity, all aspects of society. And definitely aging took a huge hit. And I think I'll probably touch on it more in the financial aspect of it. So just keep that in mind, the uncertainty of life. And if aging is something that we consistently do, we're continuously doing, at any moment, any time. It doesn't matter if you reach 70, it doesn't matter if you are 20. Life is uncertain. And so living your best life, it takes on a different meaning. Next slide, please. Living our best life or something like it. You can move on from there. So one key to living our best lives is health. And I think that people can attest to this. I wonder if I had to take a survey, and I wouldn't because it's just a delay. A lot of people during this whole pandemic were very scared, you might know someone, to go to the doctor just because it's all this hypersensitivity about COVID. So people felt, hey, if I go to the doctor, they're going to diagnose me with COVID or they're going to swab me and I have to do the test and I don't want to do it. But I ask these questions here. Are we looking after our health the way we should be? Are we treasuring our body the way we should be? Are we filling it with good things? Are we moving? Preventative approach versus curative. And I'm going to break that down a little. So my question to you, rhetorical, when was the last time you visited your doctor? And I don't mean just visit the doctor when something is paining or when something doesn't feel right, but when was the last time you genuinely just had a regulatory checkup? Because the thing about it is that we should be doing our checks regularly, annually, unless your doctor indicate otherwise. Like, let's say you go, you check your eyes at the optometrist. For women, we do our wellness woman at the OBGYN. For men, they have to do their prostate checks, that sort of stuff. And from time to time, it's good to get a good a full blood workup. Get your bloods done, see what's going on in the body to make sure it's going well. Are we doing this? That's the question we need to ask. Only you can answer that. I don't know. And then some people might present the argument, and I do agree that sometimes it is very costly to do all these things. Not everyone has the ability to do these things privately, so it might have to be done publicly. And I do know that sometimes there's a wait within the public system, there's a delay. Sometimes it can be very frustrating. And so people may just blow it off and say, I'll put it off. But it's something that I always say. You have one life. I say this with my husband all the time. You only have one life and you only have one health. And if we bear in mind that we only have one of these things, then we would treat it and appreciate it much more and do all we can to treasure it. And as I was thinking about my 106-year-old aunt, I said, oh my gosh, well, her heart was beating for 106 years and her kidneys were cleaning her blood and the toxins from her body for 106 years. And her liver was doing the same for 106 years. And her fingers were working for 106 years. And I'm like, geez, these organs were really faithful to her. And I knew she was faithful to them. But how many of us are faithful to our bodies? How many of us are really, really checking up on what is important? It's important to go to the doctor to get a check, not just when you feel the need. And that's where the preventative approach versus curative comes in. So all preventative means you do it before it happens. So if you keep checking, you keep going for your health annual checks and so forth, the likelihood to catch something before it becomes worse is greater than curative. That means you have then had the illness, then you have to treat it with medication, and sometimes it's past the point of repair. But you know what we say? Oh my gosh, if only I had done this, or if only I had done that, or the doctor has to tell you, you know, so and so, so why didn't you come in earlier? When was your last check? Some people go like, I haven't been to the doctor for like 10 years. And I'm like, so many things happen in the body over 10 years. Because guess what? Naturally, we are degenerating. It's a natural occurrence. So like me, I went to the optometrist in 2019, didn't get there in 2020 because of COVID. And then went this year for the first time since 2019. And he says to me, well, geez, Trudy, you have pressure, high pressure in your eye. And I went like, so what does that mean? And what will that lead to? He goes like, well, it's the early signs of glaucoma. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great difference 2 years make. And I haven't done anything differently, but it's natural degeneration. And then it's based on genetics. So aging and how we age, there is a genetical code that we abide by. And what you can do is by nurture, you can help what comes naturally. So what is your genes, which is nature? By nurture, your environment, what you do, what you take in, what you put out, you know, it impacts that which is natural. So now I know ahead of time, well, pressure's in my eye and I have to watch and monitor for that. So we are approaching it preventatively, but there might come some time where I have to address it in another way. I have to wear spectacles, or I don't know. Hopefully technology will change by then that my eyes will keep seeing. But these are the things we have to think about. Are we moving? Are you taking part in exercise? And it doesn't have to be anything too rigorous. It doesn't have to be in a gym. A gym is nice. People love going to the gym. I don't disrespect that, but it can be a stroll. It can be going to the beach. I think that Barbados, again, the Caribbean, is very underutilized. I think once you see something all the time, you get used to it, and then it doesn't have the same effect anymore. So it's just like, oh yeah, the beach is there. But I feel it's underutilized, and that there's so much that we can get. I remember sometimes I used to go to the beach early mornings, and tons of seniors were there. This is at Miami Beach. Tons. They'll come very early. I'm like, oh my gosh, the water is cold. And they'll put me to shame. They're going in and they're swimming out down to the boats. And then they're coming back in and they're like, now I can start my day. And I met this one who was like 90 something. I said, what is the secret? He's like, the secret is in the salt. It does something to your bones. And I have to believe him. And I stopped going because sometimes time simply doesn't allow. But what activity are we getting involved in to keep our joints moving, to keep our bodies moving, that we don't necessarily just be there? I mean, some people go like, well, I walk enough. I go to work and I'm at work and da-da-da-da-da. It's not deliberate exercise. But you definitely have to keep moving. And that's a big part of health. And once you have your health, I believe you have a lot. You have everything, because health produces life, we hope. Unless something, for instance, then life ends in a way that is not related to health, because you can be completely healthy and still die, unfortunately. But if you have health, we know you are able to function, you're able to think, your brain is working well, your blood is circulating, that sort of stuff. So health is key to living your best life. I'm going to move on now to the next aspect of living your best life: finance. And I preface this with two questions. Have we thought about what we want our lives to look like as we age? Then, have we thought about what it would cost us for the life we would like? I believe that there are some people who do think about what they want their years to be like. I don't even know if they think about what they want their years to be like. I feel as though people just think about dreams. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do the next, I want to do the third. But in terms of planning about your aging, planning for your aging, planning for growing old, and I mean things such as questions such as, well, in the instance that I have an illness, do I want to be institutionalized? Or do I want to be cared for at home? Or even if you're young right now, and let's say you have aging parents, do you think about their life? Do I want my parents to go to a home, or do I want to keep them at home? Is the house that they're in retrofitted for any immobility or anything like that? If there needs to be a wheelchair or a scooter, or a lift, do I have the facilities to facilitate that? And if I don't have it and they need it, what resource then would I need? Are we asking ourselves those questions? Or what type of quality of life do I want when I age? Do I want to be able to travel the world, meet up with some friends, do cruising? Do I want to be able to still go out to dinner, the finer things in life, do what I love? Do I want to be able to give back in a tangible way? What is it that I look forward to? Do I want to have an inheritance to pass on to my grandchildren, or will I have nothing? These are the types of questions that we need to ask, and these are the types of questions that we face. I remember in the presentation 2 years ago, I went to the extreme of saying you should plan your funeral, and I know it's a very uneasy topic to talk about, but have we even considered that? I could say funerals sometimes, I believe, are sadder, because guess what? People are left in debt because nobody thought about it. But these are questions we need to think about, because we see how life is going, we see the trajectory. So even if we haven't thought about it before, maybe it should start coming into our mindset to start asking ourselves these questions. But further to that, we have this standoffish, how can I describe it? This very standoffish approach to money, a very love-hate relationship with money. It's about, I can get it, I can spend it. There's not really much of a respect for it, sometimes I find. And sometimes there's just simply not enough education around it. And I am no financial guru. I am learning. I'm very basic. I'm a Dave Ramsey type of girl. I go on YouTube and I look at these people talking about it, and try to get information from here and there. But one thing I know is that we need money, and that money is not so terrible. and that sometimes it grants us access. And furthermore to money, what we need essentially is resources and the access to resources. And sometimes in the community, that is what is lacking. And so I think that people suffer because of the fallout of money, understanding it, planning well, that sort of thing. I remembered in college, I had a professor and he said his specialization is in poverty. And he said to us, poverty kills, and it will always stick with me. He said, poverty kills. And we asked him, how do you mean poverty kills? And he said, when you lack access, you suffer. And thankfully, and I'm not saying that everyone is going to be rich. That's what I'm not perpetuating that at all, because it's not the reality. But we have to bring ourselves into an alignment of understanding money and planning our resources, what we have. If it's a little or if it's a lot, a good plan, it goes a long way. And I remembered his idea was he had a little sister and they grew up in the southern part of the US. And the southern part, some parts are really, really, really poor, deep south. And his sister got ill, took ill, and they lived in the suburbs, but the suburbs is like a really poor village, wasn't developed anything. This is coming up in like 1970s US, post not civil war, what's the other one? The racial war, racial tensions. And pretty much she got sick, she took ill. And because they had no money, they couldn't get her to a hospital to be treated, and subsequently she died. And he grew up with that example that if my parents had money, we would have been recognized and my sister wouldn't have died. And he lived, and he still lives, this passion of understanding what drives poverty and how we can get out of it, or how we can make ourselves a little more aware that we can be a little more friendly with money. That's what drives his cause, and I completely respect him for it. So back on to my topic about finance. But if you go to the institutions, if you want to be institutionalized at a home, are you going to go public or private? Because you can go to the geriatric hospital or you can do private. But if you go private, how am I funding this? Do I have enough finances? Another thing is, let's say you're middle-aged and you have your mortgage payments and so forth. Where am I at on my mortgage payments? And when I come out on retirement, will I have enough income coming in at me to sustain my life? Will I have enough income coming in at me to eat, to keep bills paid, to run the house, to maintain the house? These are questions we have to ask. Only on Sunday, and I took note, there was an article in the Barbados Today paper, and the Prime Minister, she was talking about reform of the pension, and not just NIS, because she said NIS just is not sustainable the way it is, but other pensions, alternative pensions. And this is something that came out of COVID-19. It came out before COVID-19, but the state of pensions for people who are retiring and people who are coming out of work. And I remember a few years before COVID started, there was this whole big soiree in Denmark. Denmark is who sounded the alarm on pensions, and that it just is simply not sustainable for nations anymore to support seniors. So we have a real crisis on hand, because if we're sitting dependent upon a pension from your government, a social security plan, then what is there for us to look forward to? And I'm not knocking the NIS, I'm not knocking pension plans. I'm just saying we need to figure out, how are we paying for ourselves? If they're saying we are living longer, then how are we sustaining ourselves? And another thing we have to look at coming out of COVID-19 is inflation and how that has risen. Only on Sunday again, gas prices went up. I mean, even if it went up by a cent, it still went up, and it's on the rise just because of geopolitical conflicts and crises. And so how does aging and living our best lives fit into this? Because it impacts us. It impacts how we're going to go about life. It impacts how we're going to plan. It impacts if we're going to have a best life to live, or if life is going to look a little less than best. That's for us to decide. That's for us to decide. I can't tell you if it will, right? But we have to start having the discussion about finance and what the projection looks like for if I if I live older. What is it that it costs me currently to exist? My cost as Trudy is quite high. Got my loans to pay, got my baby to feed, got the house to run, all of those things, car to run, all of that, right? It's expensive right now. I don't know what 5 years look like. I think it's going to be worse than now. Then on top of it, you have high unemployment rate amongst young people. People aren't getting jobs. So who's paying into the funds to support our currently aging people? Those are questions we need to ask. Will I be dependent upon others? What's the backup plan? Do I have an emergency fund? I don't want to sound like a financial guru, but this is what living your best life is about. Asking those key questions and making a plan that at least you know what? You can still live. You can still enjoy, even if it's simple things, you can still do because you have made provision for that. I think it is wise that we look at the finance and not necessarily treat it like just that outside child. It's something that we're very much entangled and intertwined with. So I have here, when there's finance and available resources, there is less worry. We can somehow breathe a little easier. Doesn't it feel good when you have a little extra cash in your pocket? You can say, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. You feel really good. It makes you feel good knowing that you have a few more zeros on your bank account and it is not going out. It feels good when you have your credit cards all paid off. It feels good to go and swipe and say, you know what? I don't have to worry about that transaction complete. You know what feels even better? When you're able to give and bless people and you don't have to worry about my needs. Those are taken care of. And that, I believe, is what is living your best life. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to drain you with the finance or be punitive about it, but it's something to think about. The next aspect is mental health. And another topic that I think highly stigmatized, not talked about frequently, very hush-hush, almost as it's very shameful to talk about it. And I think that it sends whoever is feeling that way into a deeper stupor, because you then feel as though I can't share how I truly feel. And I put here, how are we really doing? Emphasis on really, because we pretend. And it has become customary for us to put up a face, to put up a mask, literally, and just act as though everything is okay. You know, you ask people, have you ever had that where you ask people, how are you doing? And they just give the generic answer of, I'm all right, I'm good. But I ask people, how are you truly doing? And when you get to that point where you can ask that question, and not only just ask the question, but be gracious enough to listen to the answer, you'll be surprised what people are going through. And I think that, Reverend Boyce, you probably see it at an even more macro level as, you know, the head of the church and so forth, and other pastors and so forth who might be here, other professionals. You probably see it in different levels. But people are having a hard bout right now in life. And some people are not quick to admit it. But how are we really doing? Have we checked in with ourselves? Are you feeling hopeless? Are you feeling in despair? Are you feeling like, oh my gosh, my back is against the wall. It feels as though nothing is going in my favor. I can tell you, I feel like that so many times. And that's the truth. I feel like that so many times, and I have to check in with myself, and I have to pinch myself and say, Trudy, are you all right? You're not okay. You're not okay. And sometimes I need to step aside from my all and go like, you're not okay. Because then I get more snappy and I get very intolerant very quickly. And sometimes it's the people I love, right? And I don't know if anybody else goes through it. It might just be me. It might just be me. But I believe tons of people go through it. And I have to check myself constantly. I have to constantly introspect. Something happens. And you know what? In these past 2 years, I just go like, I just want to live. I just want to live. I mean, by nature, I'm kind of like hypochondriac, where I think that, oh gosh, something is, as soon as something pains me, I think it's this, or I go worst case scenario. I'm one of those Google people. I go on Google and I look up and I think, oh my gosh. And Google gives you the extreme version. They always give you the worst. They don't give you the best. And I have to check myself. But are we checking in with ourselves? Because your mind becomes boggled down with stuff. There's lots of stuff that we're taking in that is very heavy, and we sometimes don't process it. And it gets on the inside of us, and we're not doing okay. But further from ourselves, have we checked in with others? The people around us. Are we asking them, how are they doing? How are you living? How are you handling it? What you're going through? Are we doing that? Are we truly okay? Are others truly okay? Have we sought the adequate help? And this is something really dear to me. I think that a lot of times we don't seek the adequate help. We don't seek the true professionals that we should seek. And I'm not knocking, don't think I'm knocking pastors here or anything. But I find sometimes we're very comfortable going to the pastor. That's a starting point. But have you seen a therapist? There are people that are highly trained who can give the assistance if we just step out and trust them enough to do so. But we get caught up, no, I'm going to keep this to myself. You know, I'm going to sleep this off. Everything can get better. Just it doesn't. And you keep feeling as though you're going a little further down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland. You know, it truly is amazing that we don't take care of our mental health. And then when something breaks or something happens, then we see a whole big set of posts, oh, checking on your friends. I see that a lot. As soon as the suicide happens, you know, checking on your friends, you never know what's happening. So you weren't checking before. And it shouldn't cause a suicide for you to do that. But while I'm on suicide, do you have suicidal thoughts? That's another thing. Are you feeling like, you know what, I want to end it all because I'm just not sure? Are you feeling depressed? Do you feel the idea of not being able to function, or I'm functioning but I'm exhausted, and all the other things? And sometimes these things can be masked. I'm very tired. You know, these things can be very masked. Or you get anxious, you're having panic attacks, your heart is racing within you, and you don't feel like, oh, this will calm itself down, or I'll take a Panadol for it, or something like it. And we fail to admit, I'm not doing well. And mental health is such a key part of aging. And I think Lynette said it beautifully at the beginning, that seniors were more susceptible. They were told, don't come out to anything, don't go to church, don't go to the bank, don't go to the grocery store. So then what's left for them to do? What was left for them to do? Tons of loneliness. Many seniors died not seeing their loved ones. Very lonely, it's a very in despair state. And it doesn't just mean just the seniors, but how many of us at maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 are lonely, are having these feelings and not saying, we're not checking in with ourselves, and we're not checking in on others, and we're not checking in with the right people to give us the help. Or maybe we're not trusting of people. Oh, my business gonna get out. I feel that a lot in the Barbados community. As a clinician, when I first got back here, I meant like therapy in Barbados is very, very hard because everybody thinks there's this mistrust of the system, or that your business is going to be told and that sort of stuff, and priorities therefore not placed on therapy. And sometimes it does happen. I will admit, sometimes it does happen. But for the most part, a real true professional will grant you the help that you need. And then self-care is something that's thrown around a lot. But are we taking care of ourselves? I feel like we get caught up in so many different roles. As he was reading through my introduction, wife, sister, mother, friend, all these different roles, and they have different demands on you and different demands on your time. And then you're dealing with people in your social sphere or in your work sphere, and they're exhausted. And it's tons of stuff you're dealing with. Then you're dealing with the children, and oh my gosh, and if the children were at home school and you had to be working from at home, and you pulling your hair out because you just can't deal with it, and you wondering, how do the teachers deal with this every day? Right? But then when do you stop to care for yourself? Self-care, it's about living your best life, right? So if I don't care for me, who will? And then what happens? Over time, it keeps going. We forget ourselves. We forget ourselves till we leave this life. And then what happens? They put some beautiful, beautiful spreads on top of your grave. Said, oh, she was a good person. Were you a good person to you? That's stuff we have to think about if we're thinking about living our best life, or age to perfection, or optimal aging. And self-care doesn't have to be expensive, because I think that we think about things such as going for a massage. We think about the big things, right? My self-care is literally picking up a Snickers bar. I remember, you know what? Chocolate is just beautiful. It's as simple as picking up some Haagen-Dazs ice cream in the supermarket. It doesn't have to be cost prohibitive. It's about maybe just spending a night by yourself and just watching some Netflix. I love Christmas movies. I'm a Christmas in July person. Christmas can be every day for me. So you know what? Sometimes I go like, Blaze, you're not watching Paw Patrol. Mommy is watching a Christmas movie. That's it. And I'll put it on and I'll have a grand old time. And sometimes I cry at the parts that I love the most. And I go like, oh, that session was nice. It's as simple as picking up a coloring book. Like, those adult squiggly coloring books and just coloring, doing mandalas. That's self-care. Taking time for yourself, just standing in the shower and letting the water just beat right down on you from head to toe. That's self-care. I'm taking a moment for me. Plugging out from all the cares of this world and just taking a moment for me. Next slide, please. Social life. And I'm coming to the end quickly. I have one more aspect after this. Social life. So I know because we were all locked up, a lot of people started to get into new things. And that was very, very encouraging to see. People took up new skills. People went to the hardware store, started to do gardening, the home gardens where you can have like your edible stuff, all that good, lovely thing, all those good, lovely things. People started businesses. They got really, really creative. Being bored did something. It motivated people. But how receptive are we to trying new things? And I have here in my side notes written, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's a saying that they like to say. Oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Not quite true. Especially in aging, when we were in school, they would tell us that, can you teach an old dog new tricks? And the answer is absolutely yes. This is commencement season, what we call commencement season, which is graduation season in essence. And I always love to see on the news how many seniors graduated at age 90 after they raised their family and so forth. They finally returned to school and they finally got this degree and that degree and everything. And I'm like, you go, you go, you go. Can you teach your old dog new tricks? You absolutely can. Life is about learning. It's a lifelong process. Learning is a lifelong process, and we should never ever be shut down to it. And about living your best life. When you try new things, when you want to switch it up and you're tired of the routine and the mundane, you're going to be living your best life, because guess what? You stepped outside of your comfort zone. You did something that probably you feared terribly, and you finally got the confidence to do it. You tried something new, and you know what you feel? You feel this sense of accomplishment, you feel this sense of achievement, and you feel this very can-do attitude. And that's great, because it motivates you to want to keep living, to want to keep going, and to encourage others to do so. And then that leads to embracing change. Things can look different. It's about adaptability. It's about evolution. It's about becoming different persons. We'll never be the same person throughout life, though some people expect you to be. So we go like, she really changed. He or she really changed. This thing changed he. This thing changed he. That sort of stuff. It's a very, very shut down attitude to change. But yes, absolutely. I don't expect you to remain the same, because guess what? Your experience have not all been the same. Your experiences have shaped the person that you are. And so you will change as a result. You will figure out a way to deal with that and a way to deal with this. And it's going to become a whole new you. And that keeps changing. As I grow older, I want to keep changing, because I know I'm not stagnant. I know something is happening for me in life. So embracing change helps with our social life. Meeting somebody new. Going up and just saying, hi, my name is such and such. You'll be amazed how many friends you get like that sometimes. You go to the beach, or you're sitting at the bus stop and you start a conversation. And the other day was in Costulas, and I went sniffing cilantro. I love to smell cilantro. And there's this young lady there, and she saw me sniffing the cilantro. I said, I shouldn't be doing this. I really shouldn't be sniffing cilantro. This is terrible. Somebody probably will lock me up. And she says, do you do that too? I said, yeah, I love sniffing fresh herbs. Then she goes like, do you sometimes eat the seasoning when you buy it? I said, yeah. And I love Marleyville seasoning. I'm promoting Marleyville seasoning there in St. Philip, one of the best seasonings you'll ever have. Yeah, I love to try Marleyville seasoning. I love to eat seasoning raw. It tastes good, right? And she was so mesmerized that somebody else had her quality or her trait. She thought she was the only one in the world who had it. And she thought she was weird for it. And I said, no, the whole world is full of weirdos. Like, you'll be surprised who's just like you and who just wants to connect. So remember that, embracing change, trying new things, not just doing things just because I'm going through the motion and saying I'm all right with this and I'm all right in my space. No, as you grow older, you should be excited to do more. I really, really, truly believe that, because guess what? Time is not on your side. And when you see that time isn't on your side, you want to try to do everything, Family, big. Family is everything. And sometimes I'll tell you the truth, we don't all get along with family all the time. And that's normal. That is a regular stage of families. It's a regular stage of groups. When you're in group doing group work, you have that stage of storming. You have what we call triangulation, people picking sides and all that. You have what you call scapegoating. All of these are terms, psychological terms, don't have to get into it, but you all live it. You know that you got the sister you don't talk to, or you got the aunt that you don't talk to, and he better don't call me, or she better don't call me, ain't got nothing to say. We know we have all of that. That's the reality of it. And it is quite normal. It's not out of the norm. but family is everything. And we need them. We need them. And one thing I believe that we were taught is how much we need our family. And being there, being present. One thing that you are is privy to such a conversation, such a discussion of the importance of family. And so, you know what? I don't have to be that person. I can be there. I can be there. And sometimes you need to have boundaries with people. I'm not going to lie. You have to have boundaries with family. Um, but it's okay to be there. And some people need people. Then intimacy. And I heard this thing about marriage vows. I wasn't able to attend sessions just because at this time I normally am taking care or getting my son off to bed. But I'm sure marriage vows probably touched on that. Intimacy, spousal intimacy. But you can have intimacy with friends as well. You can be close and hang out and love each other the same way. Friendship. Friendship is a good thing. It combats loneliness. And again, some people show you who they are and some friendships end. But you want to foster friendship. You want to foster goodness. You want to have people who are not toxic in your life. And part of that is understanding and discerning enough and being selective with who you include around you. So I would think that as we go through life and we progress through life and we have experience, we should become a little more sage. And we should have a little more wisdom. Hopefully, not everybody gets wisdom, but we should have a little more understanding of who to let in and who's dear to us and how to treat them. But friendship is super important. Intimacy, very important. I think when God created marriage, like it was so beautiful. I think that, and I'm not knocking anybody else if they're not married or anything. So don't feel that way. I'm not judging you if you're not married or anything, because I know this can go to a wide audience. But I believe intimacy and having partnership, it is so important as we age and if we live our best life. And friendship, intimacy, all those things, you are doing things with others, and that's what is the joy right there. You're able to take your friends and say, hey, let's go on a hike, right? Or you take your husband and say, let's go out for dinner, right? So you're able to do things. And when you don't have that, because these things, family, intimacy, friendship, it fosters love included, it fosters companionship, it fosters partnership. And you want to see and be involved in activities with these people because you love how they make you feel. You love being around them and they love how you make them feel as well. So there's some mutual benefit to the relationship. So social life is very, very important in living your best life because you want to live your best life with someone. You don't want to live your best life alone. I will hope not, because then you'll just be a hermit. But I am sure you want to live your best life with someone, whether it's a friend, whether it's a husband, whether it's a family member. I love being with my family. And we sometimes quarrel with each other. We sometimes don't get it right. But I love being with my family and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I treasure it even more because I know, guess what? Life is short. Life is short. And at any time, anything can happen. And then how do I feel? I think about that. And so I sit and sometimes I just smile. And sometimes I leave the house and my mother and them probably don't know this, but I leave the house and I'm driving around the corner because I live 7 minutes away and I cry. And I tell my husband, oh my gosh, I truly love my parents. How much do we tell the ones we love that we love them? I told my sister the other day, I need to start saying I love you more. I really, really, really do. It's something that we're growing up and we don't really sometimes share, but how many of you say I love you? And I look at my son and I say, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I kiss his face, I kiss his face, I kiss his face. And then somewhere along the line of them being 19 months and then becoming 21, we don't say I love you. And we wish we could say I love you. Love is part of living your best life.
I have a question for you, Trudy.
Sure.
Right. So as a family member, how do you deal with an aging relative who seems to be isolating everyone? Since we're on the topic of social life and friendship and family and so on. And I guess I can probably add to that maybe what is it that causes persons to isolate themselves as they age sometimes?
The whole idea of aging, that's a really good question. People isolate for different reasons. Sometimes I'll start with just mental, psychological. Sometimes they might be concocting things in their mind. Sometimes you might be dealing with something such as paranoia. There might be an underlying issue there that's not being addressed. That's clinical. Sometimes people isolate for the simple reason of fear and fear of what is to come. Or again, this idea that people are not seeing them in the same light. We go through several changes, and a lot of this has to do with perception of self and how does one see self, and how one sees self, it changes. And as we age, sometimes we can lose confidence in ourselves, and we might entertain the idea that people don't want to hang around me, or I'm old. A lot of it is I'm old, I don't want to be a bother to anybody. Or some people on the other hand might not be so kind. They might be very, I'm being honest, some people are very selfish and they don't want to be around anybody because the idea is I don't want to have to give to anybody. I don't want anybody to ask me. I'm not going to pretend like if seniors sometimes are all perfect and all nice and all angelic. That's not the reality. Some of them can be very, very brutal. And if you have been a specific way all your life, likelihood you're probably going to still remain that way, right? Generally. So it's many different reasons. I would ask, is there something going on in terms of dementia, memory loss, that sort of stuff? Is there illness that the person has which they might not necessarily want to share, but they think, you know what, let me just take myself away and step back. Is it that they just have lost? There's stages of life. There are stages of life. This one theory that I love, Erickson, and he defined like two stages, the positive side and the negative side. But one of it is generativity versus stagnation, and that's it. As we start to age, you have generativity versus stagnation, integrity versus despair. And what he's saying is, if you're generating, if you're doing things, if you're still functioning, that's good. But the opposite of generativity is stagnation. You become stagnant in life. And therefore, the psychological aspects associated with that will reflect such. So you're not really producing, you're not really functioning, you're not really social, you're not really getting out there. Well, then the opposite of that is I'm going to isolate. I'm not going to be social. I'm not going to be the butterfly. It's going to start to show. So, and then integrity versus despair. Have I done enough, that people can see what I did? I left a legacy, I made memories, I did this. Versus despair, you're questioning, oh my gosh, do I regret my life? What have I done all over this time? Things go on in the mind, and we don't know what people might possibly be thinking about. When we close the doors and we leave people and all the talking and chatter has gone, when I leave this presentation, you're going to go off in your rooms and say something. It's just the reality of life. You don't know what people are saying in their minds when they are by themselves, what thoughts are coming to them, what other influences might be coming to them. And that is real. You never know what a person thinks or what goes through a person's mind. You truly, truly don't know. So I hope that helps. But the truth of the matter, if you're caring for them, it becomes difficult, right? Because you want to be let in, but they're putting up all the walls. That's very, very hard to break. And so I say to people, just be present. You being present, just your energy around them, being there, it accounts for something. And as much as people might want to be isolated, they're very happy to have somebody around, to feel a presence. So just be there and just be kind. And you know what? Sometimes just ask a question. How are you? What's going on? And I find that the simplest of questions can lead to very, very, very deep, layered answers. And people sometimes ruminate on things in the past that you would think that they would have let go of, but it's in their mind, it's in their conscience, or it's in their subconscious, and they're thinking about it, and they pull themselves away. So it could be many things. I say for who is caring for such, be there. Don't leave. Don't leave. And sometimes they might say things too that will push you away. And that's where I think being the bigger person, and that's in the spiritual aspect, forgiveness, that helps a lot in getting through this, because caring for people is not easy, and sometimes you need to step away. It's okay to do that. If it gets to a point where it's literally abusive, I say step away and let professionals in to handle that, because then they'll know what to do and how to bring it out of them. But if it's at a very mild stage, be kind and be present. When it gets to the stages where you need help, definitely take on help if it gets overbearing. I hope that answered it. No, sorry.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So I have spending time again, existing in the moment, just all in social life and everything like it, and recognizing that time is truly precious. We hear a lot about all these different commodities. The most precious commodity there is on earth, I believe, is time. It's the one thing that when it's gone, you can't get it back. You say, I wish I had more of it. It's a lot, but it's never enough. It's never enough. And the last aspect is going to be spiritual life. So spiritual life is part of living your best life. I have relationship with God, and I believe for everybody that looks different. In the context here, we are in the Christian forum. I personally am Christian. I know some viewers might not be. But there is something to be said about God. There is something to be said about relationship with Him. And I invite others to discover who God is, or talk to someone, come to a church if you want to come to church, speak with a friend if you don't want to come to a church, go on YouTube, do your searching, do something. But relationship with God, it accounts for a lot. And on the note of centenarians, that's why I love that Reverend Boyce prefaced it with lots of centenarians. You know, the first thing they ask them, so what would you attribute to living long? And I can guarantee you 95% of those centenarians will say God. So if 95% of them say that in the Caribbean context, there must be something to it that we can't quite put our hands on. And they have learned the truth about who God is, and they have proven Him for their whole lives. That's why they can get to that stage and said, I can attribute that to God. And then they will talk about what they ate and all of that, right? And sometimes maybe they drink a shot of brandy. Some people say, I drink a shot of brandy, I never got sick. And I believe there's something to that too, though I don't know what it is, but there might be something. But relationship with God, because you wouldn't know who God is until you need to prove him for yourself. And that's where testimony comes in. And I can't fault a person or tell a person that what you believe isn't right, because only you were in that situation. You knew what you were going through. You knew what you needed God to bring you through. You knew what you were praying and talking to him about, and you knew what he came through on you with you for. And as a result, you develop relationship and you know God. So I don't knock or I don't get into those little conversations. Only you can know. And I believe the older people when they said God, because they have seen a lot. Those eyes have seen a lot. They've seen a lot of eras. They've seen a lot of things change. And they had to deal with lots of heavy situations. And they attribute their life, their existence, their longevity to God, the presence of God in their life. And then we have relationships with your fellow man. So I think about living your best life. Do you want to harbor thoughts of ill will in your mind? And that's something a lot of people, and again, I'm not a reverend here, but a lot of people are holding on to a lot of things. There's not forgiveness. And we walk around and we carry it along. And again, we ruminate on it. And we think about who did what and what did who and blah, 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 blah. And guess what? It bogs us down. We're not going anywhere. It stresses us out. It makes us age even more. Because we haven't learned to let go. We haven't learned to forgive. And part of forgiveness is recognizing I don't need to go back. What is toxic and what is not toxic, but you can still forgive. You don't need to necessarily go back and be with toxic folk or be with toxic situations. No, you move on. That's part of living your best life. Letting go of the things that don't make sense and embracing the things that do, and that brings you pleasure. So do we gossip? We sit down and we talk, idle talk about people. Is it constructive? Are we seeing the goodness in others? Or are we just whatever? Pulling down. Do we seek to build community? That's spirituality. And then I have meaning making, but in meaning making, you have to ask yourself the question, what's the purpose in life? And I think we can have many purposes. And sometimes we're looking for this huge, big answer. And we're saying, God, show me a sign, or speak to the prophet and let him just speak over me and tell me what it is that I need to do in my life. And it's something very, very simple. Are we finding the meaning in life for us? What is my role in this current situation? What is my role in my family? What's my role in the church? What's my role at the school? What's my role in the workplace? What's my role as I walk the street? What is my role? What is the meaning that I am making out of situations, out of life's experiences? And then from meaning making, what is it that I am building? Again, the generativity versus the stagnation. Am I leaving something behind? And I don't mean a tangible something like a house, a car, or a lump sum of cash. What am I building? There's this song that says, oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. And will those who come behind us find us faithful? May the power of our devotion light their way. May the footprints that we leave lead them to believe that the life we lived inspired them to obey. Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. That's a song of legacy. I want to be found faithful. I don't know about anybody else, but I want to be found faithful. We had an exercise to do one time, and this was in grief and bereavement, when we were being taught about grief and bereavement. And how he started the class, he said, I want all of you to write your eulogy. He said, I want you to write it. Many people had a hard time. I too had a hard time. It's like, what? This is kind of morbid. And he's like, I want you to write it. Many people struggled of what would be said about them. And something that came up in class, he's like, you don't have, y'all never lived. Y'all have nothing to write. Y'all clearly didn't do anything. Y'all didn't have an impact. Y'all don't think that anybody would miss you. A lot of people didn't have anybody who would miss them. That's sad. What do you want to leave behind? What do you want to be said about you? What do you want to be remembered as? What do you want to leave for generations to come to inherit, whether they're out of your loins or not? What is it that you want to leave behind? Because if you know that answer now, you're going to live your life in a way to manifest that then, when you're gone. And the ones who went before, the centenarians and those who aren't centenarians, I think that one thing they had in common is that some of them, not all, some of them, they left legacy that we can look back on and we can talk about. And guess what? It's stored for eternity. And I believe in heaven. And I believe in God giving out crowns. And I believe in all of that. And I believe in standing before him and hearing my life story read out. And I wonder if my life story will be equated to that which he had planned from when I was conceived in my mother's womb. Because sometimes I feel we deviate. But it's something to think about, because spirituality is super important. It keeps us grounded. It gives us purpose. It makes meaning of life when life makes no sense. Right now, in the chaos, in the madness, we're able to still chart a course, and we're able to find a path, and God is able to light a way for us if we believe. And if we don't believe, he still lights a way, I believe, if you choose to see it. And so this is where I think I can cut off and end. I went through the finance, the spiritual life, health, social life, mental health, how all of these things contribute to aging to perfection. And one thing that I wanted to, there was the last slide that I wanted to show. I don't know if Lennox can pull that back up, but right, there's the last slide there. I love my quotes. Let's see, right, and note. John 16, verse 33. I'm not trying to take you to church, but John 16:33, the NIV version. I have told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Jesus. And the truth of the matter is, aging is uncertain. Aging brings with it joy, it brings with it sorrow, it brings with it everything that you can possibly think of. But I feel like these words are so potent, and I feel as though they lift up off the page right now, that everything we're going through, and he said this talking to the disciples about his crucifixion and so forth, and he saw that the disciples were sorrow. He said, I'll be with you and then I won't be with you. And it was that kind of language, and they couldn't understand. And he saw that there was conflict in their minds. And I think that he sees today that there's conflict in our minds and that we're not sure. We want the best, but we're just not simply sure. But he said, take heart, for I have overcome the world. And I have to hold on to that. And I encourage you to hold on to that, that there is someone who has went before. There's someone who knows the beginning from the end. He knows the beginning of your story, the ending of your story, the in-between of your story. He knows everything about it. And that we can find comfort in that. And that aging can be beautiful. The mere fact that you have breath You live each day empowering yourself. You live each day looking out for others. You live each day caring for people around you, loving them, being good, being kind, saying the right things. You live each day taking care of yourself. And it's on that note that I will end. I hope that this session was helpful to you, and I entertain any questions.
Trudy, it really was helpful. It was enlightening, inspiring, educational, challenging, thought-provoking, all those things, which I expected it to be. And it gave us so much to think about. Yeah, and I know that with all that has happened in the last couple of years, it was quite relevant too, in light of where we are and so on. So this has been a tremendous blessing. I'm sure that persons who have watched have been blessed by what you presented. I certainly have been blessed, and you know, the reality that we are all aging. And when we think about aging, we are not just highlighting persons in a particular age group as we do sometimes, but we realize that we're all on a journey, you know, which will take us, if all goes well, into seniority. In terms of chronological age, and all of us have to prepare to be there and to be able to cope with what that season of life brings to us. All right, so thank you so much, Trudy, for being with us this evening. I just want our listeners to know that our series concludes next week. We are looking at pearls of wealth. That should be a very interesting topic as we look at pearls of wealth. I know that you touched on a little bit of that today, Trudy, yourself. But next week we're gonna be having Nikita Gibson, who is going to be with us, and she is going to be dealing with a number of topics. And I am sure that these are things that persons would want to know about. It's about identifying your life stage, financial planning, how to set goals, how to budget, how to save, how to invest, how to build wealth, financial tips to know and practice, and so on. So it should be another riveting session. And I look forward to having all of you join tonight. So we had over 100 persons who joined us this evening, Trudy. And like I told you before, that's why we can't do our sessions on Zoom, because then some persons are not going to be able to get into the room. All right. But once again, thank you so much. You indeed are a blessing. And we want to thank God for you and for your wonderful work for him and for his kingdom. And so we just want at this time to wrap up our session. We want to say to all those persons who were in, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening for our Family Life Enrichment series. Remember, this series is brought to us this year, compliments of the Churches of God in Brereton, Bournes Village, The Garden, and Silver Sands. And we have partnered to bring this to you, so we are grateful. May the Lord bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, both now and forevermore. Amen. God bless you and thank you for joining us today.